Hello there, beautiful friends. I'm Blackenfist, and I'm here doing my very first interview with a very special guest that I have actually been following. He is a creator of probably what I consider to be the best Dragon Ball retrospective on YouTube. And it is a very good pleasure to welcome this guy, Lance, otherwise better known throughout the interwebs as MistareFusion.
Hello, no, the pleasure is mine. Thank you so much for having me on your show today.
Pleasure's all around. So one thing that I really wanted to know is Dragon Ball is such a massive series, and with the type of the way you've gone into it analytically, going so detailed into it, what was your mindset going in to doing this, and how is it that you were saying, okay, I'm going to do this whole series and I'm going to do it really detailed? I mean, what was the mindset going into that? What was the spark for that Dissection series?
Well, first off, yes, it is very daunting, especially for something that is natively in a different language, a language that I am not fluent in. So it's, like other things, you can really pick apart lines really easily and go, oh, the character said this, and really, make, poke fun at certain things and just really get into the details. And with Dragon Ball, I'm always afraid I'm going to get something wrong. And, I'm very lucky to have, the website like Kanzenshu, kanzenshu.com, where people do speak Japanese and do have a really wonderful database of things, and I probably would not be able to get this done without them. But as for my mindset, I don't know, I guess to a certain extent I like sort of literary analysis. I always have. And Dragon Ball's always been one of my favorite fandoms and one of my most long-lived fandoms. And I think that there is something of a void that I thought could have been filled with that, where it seems like a lot of the stuff on YouTube, especially, at least at the time where I first started thinking about this, was largely music videos or hype.
I think I get what you're saying, because this was kind of my own mindset. There wasn't a lot of things with that, a lot of substance or going deeper into what Dragon Ball is just, yeah, I can understand what you're saying there. I also would want to know is what is the basic process of actually making a typical dissection video, because obviously you go through scripting and you go through all that. And I'm pretty sure you read the manga and such when you do one of these dissection videos. So what is the, I guess, most difficult part about the dissection videos?
I'd say largely it's in the details. It's sort of like I was saying before, where it's it's hard to get a very specific idea without really good, accurate translations. And I do mostly read from the Viz version of the manga, and it's a fairly good translation, but I always want to just make sure that everything is exactly accurate, so I don't say, oh, well, this this is said about this, and it turns out, oh, that's not actually what the line was. It's kind of a loose translation in that one spot. So yeah, I do read the arc, and I make notes as I'm doing that. Then I turn the notes into a script, and usually there'll be at least a few things I'm not entirely 100% sure about. And again, that's where I go back to Kanzenshu, where I go to the forum and I post a thread, and somebody there has the knowledge. There's certain people that I can always depend on for certain things. Like there's one, Jacob YBM, who I've credited in several Dragon Ball Dissection videos. He is really perfect when it comes to knowing about the animation studios and things like that. There's another wonderful user, Kinesu3000, who has this website that documents every single piece of music used in Dragon Ball, where it comes from and what episodes it's used in, what movie it originates from, things like that. And then, of course, just the founders of Kanzenshu, like Herms and Julian Grabowski, who have wonderful translations up there that I can pretty much spot check anything I need. So the hardest part is always just making sure that I know what I'm talking about, because I'm terrified of posting a video on there and somebody goes, well, you were wrong about that, and then it's out there for everybody to see forever.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Being scared like hell, posting something that might be wrong. And also, yeah, I have used the Kanzenshuu forums on some of my own videos as well. So there's just a wealth of knowledge that is on there on Kanzenshuu, and just the people that are on there too. But of course, like we all started somewhere in our fandom, and from what I could tell from the videos that I've seen, you seem to be one of those old school, you could say, type fans that were on their internet back in like the old ages of websites that perhaps I wasn't really visiting myself, maybe because I was too young and I didn't have access to the internet. So how was the introduction to the Dragon Ball fandom for you, and how was the introduction to the Dragon Ball fandom online specifically?
Well, first I'll say that I guess I am technically kind of old school in the grand scheme of things, but I consider myself more like the second generation of American Dragon Ball fans, because there were people before me, like before it ever came to America in the first place, who were sharing fan subs and like terrible low quality footage tapes, because it just didn't exist in America at the time, and I didn't get into it until it had been in America for a few years, because it was when the big Toonami boom happened, and they were rerunning those first two edited dub seasons on Toonami.
You could say that I'm definitely from the Toonami boom. But I'm also a younger guy apparently when it comes to this, so I was a toddler when most of that old school stuff was happening. So
well, I was 12 years old in the fall of '98. I caught it almost immediately. I already watched Toonami, and I remember seeing it pretty early on, and I really got hooked into it pretty quickly. And there was so many things I didn't understand at the time, where I didn't know who was related to whom. And I know a lot of friends of mine at the time thought that Goku and Yamcha were brothers because they looked kind of similar, had the same outfit on, and it was a very different time in terms of what information was out there, because most of the series had not come over to America. You had fan sites out there of certainly dubious quality.
Yeah, there was I remember those times too. Even though I was a newer fan, you could say, I remember like seeing pictures of Super Saiyan 3 Goku and thinking, oh, this is Super Saiyan 4, and seeing pictures of Gogeta and thinking that might be Gotenks in the future or something. So yeah, I remember all those things because we hadn't known these things before and the whole series.
There's so many crazy assumptions.
Oh yes, back then, rumors and
actually, I remember before I found any fan sites, I was just using Funimation's own website, Funimation.net. This is before they even had their own Dragon Ball Z website. And I noticed after a while that it kept on stopping at dub episode 53 after Goku gets to Namek. And if I remember, for a while I was thinking the show had probably been canceled, and there weren't any more episodes beyond that. And then also I had a friend, my upstairs neighbor, my best friend at the time. He had actually seen Dragon Ball when it aired on television in '95, the first 13 episodes of dubbed Dragon Ball, and he assumed that was the entire series of that too. So he was telling me stuff about that, and I remember he thought that Pilaf and Piccolo were the same character. We're just trying to like put all our grainy, fuzzy memories together about what, trying to put the pieces together, and that was a lot of fun at the first couple of years of fandom, which is not knowing what was going on and just trying to having all these crazy ideas that were just so wrong.
Yeah. I also would want to ask you, because anyone who sees your videos, you're a staunch supporter of the original Japanese dub. So I want to say, like, obviously for most American fans, we were first introduced to, if you weren't introduced to the fan subs or anything like that, we were obviously introduced to the American Funimation dub or perhaps Ocean dub. I would want to say, how was your transition from that to the original Japanese? Did you have were you a little hesitant to transition? I know for me, for example, listening to the Japanese for the first time, I kind of had to adapt to Goku's voice, because that is something that a lot of American fans can never get over, apparently. But I did eventually, but even for me, it was a transition that was not instant. So I want to know, how is it that you came from the American side of things and went into just appreciating the original?
Well, I think it was more of a gradual thing, and it was sort of, and this is it's a very sensitive subject to talk
Yeah,
about
I know.
in terms of putting on you. I again, it's something I avoid talking about in Dragon Ball Dissection for that very reason. Is that I staunchly stay by the version of the series that I know, which is the original. But I don't spend a lot of time comparing the two, or because I don't want to insult anybody, and I know that I've been very lucky with my fans, my fan base on YouTube so far, that I haven't found any people who like just really want to rip into me for being the type of fan that I am. But it was kind of a slow transition. I know there's some fans out there who didn't even realize the show was Japanese at first. I hear that on the forums all the time. I'm pretty sure I realized that it was pretty quickly, just from the style of it and all the the kanji on the characters' uniforms. But I was perfectly satisfied watching the dub of those first 53 episodes produced by Funimation with the Ocean Studios cast. I do recall the earliest fan sites I went to. A lot of them had, on their pages they'd have MIDI music samples. They have like the theme songs from the show. So I'd hear things from the I didn't realize it was from the Japanese version. The MIDI versions of Chala Head Chala and Don Don Kokoro, things like that. And I was like, oh yeah, these songs sound pretty cool. And I figured out they're from the Japanese version. I'm like, oh, this is really cool music. I think actually the first thing. In early 1999, Toonami aired the first 3 Dragon Ball Z movies for the first time. And what they chose for movies 2 and 3, Funimation had worked with Pioneer to release those directly to home video, and they had a much more accurate script, and they used the original music, which is something they'd never done with any of their products before. And I had no idea about this at the time. I was watching the second movie of The World's Strongest Guy. And I was like,
those were the uncut releases, right? Those.
Yeah. Well, on Toonami they were censored a little bit.
Well, yeah, obviously, very little
bit.
On the home release.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was my first exposure to the Japanese music, and I didn't know what it was at the time. I didn't know there were different types of music. That they changed the music. It didn't, it was all just what it was. And I was like, wow, this sounds so cool. This music sounds so atmospheric and really, epic. And I was like, and my assumption at the time was, well, this is a movie. That's why it sounds different from the TV show, because they had a bigger budget, stuff like that. That's why it sounds so great. And I just didn't think about it past that. Then season 3 started on Toonami in 1999. We had the rest of the Frieza arc episodes. And we were really pumped to get into that. One of my neighbors got one of the tapes before. Bought one of the tapes before they aired, and we watched those. And I remember, even at 13, being really confused. I didn't like the new voices. I didn't like the new music. It just sounded very amateurish. And I still think that season 3 sounds very amateurish to me. But we watched it, and we were excited, and we loved it. It wasn't until the following year my mom got a new computer, one that actually was able to connect to the internet fairly well. So I had a really, really slow internet connection before. That would take like 5 minutes to load a single web page. We got a new computer, and I finally started finding sites like Planet Namek and DBZ Uncensored and Daizenshuu EX, all the big Japanese-focused websites at the time. I started reading things like more accurate information, saying, oh, there are a lot of things in the dub that aren't being translated properly. This is on that music that I like. That's actually part of the show. I never knew that, and so I went to Suncoast. I don't know if you remember those stores. That's where I got most of my Dragon Ball stuff at the time. And I got the VHS, the subtitle VHS of the 3rd movie, and that was the first thing I ever saw in Japanese, and I really enjoyed that. So I started buying fan subs, and that's really it. I never looked back from there. I did watch all of season 4. I recorded every episode just like I had been doing before, but I really wasn't enjoying it anymore. I mentioned this on Dragon Ball Dissection, but there was a guy named Curtis Hoffman who translated, summarized all the manga volumes. And so during that time, I found all of those, and I collected them. I printed every single page out, and I read all of them. And that was how I learned everything that happened in Dragon Ball before Z. And I remember, in particular, there was this flashback in season 4 where they go over all the Red Ribbon Army stuff, and they completely got everything wrong. The General Tao, and they made all the stuff up that wasn't in there. And
that kind of annoyed me as well. The fact that he was referred to as General Tao, and I do believe that mistake was made because Funimation dubbed the Mystical Adventure movie, and he was a general in that movie, I believe, if my memory serves me right. And I believe that's where the mistake came from.
Yeah, that was about the same time, so that could have been the case. But I just remember being really angry because at this point I was way deep into the original version, and I had several fan sub tapes, and I was like, this is just not what I like. It's not what I enjoy anymore. I really haven't gone back to it since then. So, long answer, but it was a gradual thing. It was a pretty gradual thing for me.
Well, but going back to Dissection, it seems that obviously the focus is on the manga. Even though you do anime segments talking about the filler and the maybe changes that were added in the anime version, but one question that I did have in my mind was, are you going to do GT? Is that something that that is in the plans for the future?
I think chances are I will at some point. The thing is, I've never seen all of GT. I own like the last 20 episodes or so.
Hey, you're in the same club. You're in the same club. Like last time I saw GT was when it was broadcasted on American television. So
yeah, I own the last 20 episodes. Actually, one of my earliest fan subs I decided to try out. I got the first 4 episodes of GT, and I thought it was okay. I didn't really enjoy it that much, so I never got any more fan subs of that. But I have all of the last arc with the evil dragons. I've seen all that at least once through, but it's been a very long time, and so I'll have to fill in the gaps in my collection and watch it a few times before I feel at all comfortable with dissecting it.
Dissect, of course. Also, I also want to ask you, because there's the new movie that's coming out. Dragon Ball franchise is still going very strong, I think. Are we going to see any Battle of Gods analytical videos out of you, or any Battle Gods related videos?
Oh, definitely. Again, I'm trying to hold back thoughts until I actually do a Dragon Ball dissection video on it, and I've generally been going in chronological order so far, so it's probably going to be a while before I actually get around to Battle of Gods, and it's probably not the smartest move from a marketing standpoint or what have you. Not to strike while the iron is hot, but yeah, I've seen it and I enjoy it, and I have a lot of things I want to say about it.
Okay, you might not want to answer this one, but I just want to ask you, because there's a lot of debate out there. Do you think Battle of Gods is canon?
Ooh.
That might be saved for your dissection video if you want to save it, but if it's not,
No, I'm fine answering that. It's a funny thing because before the past few years, it was always really simple. It was you had the 42 volumes of manga, the 519 chapters plus the Trunks special chapter as well, and that was it. And everything else was its own. The TV series was its own continuity or redoing of that. The movies were very clearly their own separate thing that couldn't fit into them. The Dragon Ball movies were retellings and basically rewriting the story from scratch. The Dragon Ball Z movies were just out there in cuckoo land. They couldn't fit in anyway.
Right.
But now all of a sudden you have all this other stuff. You have episode of Bardock and Jocko the Galactic Controlman and Dragon Ball Minus, which it's a whole can of worms in itself. Oh, don't even get me started on Dragon Ball Minus. And now the Jump Super Anime Tour special, the Yo Son Goku and his friends return, and now this, where it's kind of blurring the line a bit, where Toriyama's involved in some of them, and this one very, very clearly is something that fits in between those two. And I can, to be honest, I haven't quite figured out if I completely accept it or not. For the large part, I think I do. But there are definitely some continuity problems.
Yes.
Yeah, and actually not just those. Have you heard of the full color comics? And in fact, he's been doing question answers in those and completely rewriting things like, oh, this is not where Majin Buu came from. He's actually this kind of creature. He wasn't made by.
Oh, my goodness, yes, I did a whole video on that whole weird comments about Majin Buu. It was yes, those. I mean, some of the things he said I do think are kind of cool, like maybe saying that 16 was Android, 16 was Dr. Gero's son. I thought that was, I guess, cool. Some people might not have liked it. I thought that was okay, but the whole Majin Buu thing, I don't know. That almost contradicts what was already written.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few that I didn't mind that were nice enough, but I don't think there was anything that to me justified all the things that were just like seemingly being pulled out of nowhere that just completely, like the number of Kaioshin who are out there and Dr. Gero being the leader of the Red Ribbon Army. It just all these kinds of like, are you just making this stuff up as you go? And so there's part of me that's like, okay, I love Dragon Ball, but I mean, you ended the series 20 years ago. Maybe we should just leave it there because things are just getting kind of weird now, and there are already enough continuity errors in the original series itself.
Yes.
I don't know.
By the way, just to be clear, I actually think that Son Goku's Friend's Return is definitively not canon because Gregory was in it. Just for a split second.
I forgot that he was.
Gregory, filler character, so to me, not canon. But, alright. Also, obviously, I think that you've already done some dissections on the movies. I'm pretty sure you're going to be doing on them all, I suppose.
Yes.
How...
God help me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, you did have a daunting task ahead of you. As Dragon Ball is an extremely long series, and you've said from the beginning that you were never in a hurry, which I think is good to your sanity because your whole life would be consumed, I would suppose.
It does happen on occasion where, like, once I get into a mood, and once I get into a certain mood, and then I start worrying about the fact that it has been taking so long, where I'll just start pumping out videos for like about a month or so, and I'll get totally burned out, I have to stop. I'm sort of on one of those kicks right now, really, where I just want to get those TV version videos done so I can get to the 23rd Budokai before the end of the year. And as part of me's feeling like, oh my gosh, it feels like I'm taking as long as it took Toriyama to write the damn thing. And
well, Toriyama had to do it weekly, so with the new movie coming out, and with seemingly it seems that these movies, we've seen multiple movies coming out in the coming years, maybe not, but I think, but with the Dragon Ball franchise and the direction it's going, do you think that we'll be seeing anything new in terms of a series? Because that's something that has been floating around there a lot, especially since, in my own estimation, if a new movie comes out and it is very successful, there is undoubtedly going to be a third movie at the very least. So where do you see the trajectory of where the Dragon Ball franchise is going right now? And do you think it's still strong enough to support something like that again? Or is it just, are we just wishful thinking here?
I think my answer could be twofold based on what I would want and based on what I actually think. And I always hesitate to say something like this because it makes me sound like a bad fan. But just in terms of long-running franchises in general, and I sort of hinted at this during the last question, is that I'm okay with things having a satisfying conclusion. I greatly respect a creator who can say, I've told the story I want to tell, and now I'm going to end it. I've been happy that there are only 7 Harry Potter books. I'm just wary about franchise fatigue. It's one of those things where if you continue to do things as long as it's successful, then it's only going to end when it starts getting really bad and nobody cares anymore. So
some people argue that that's what GT was.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good case in point. So I mean that's not to say that I am completely against any kind of idea of resurrecting an old franchise, because sometimes it can be really good. You can get some really good mileage out of things if there is a really good story you want to tell. But especially after things have been ended for a while. People change, people forget things, people have different mindsets, different priorities, which I think sort of contributes to Toriyama saying different things now than he was saying back then, is that it's hard to come back into something you've been away from for so long and still have it be the same thing it was before. So I'm always wary when something tries to come back, where it's like, you could just leave it alone and things, I'd be happy with that. I'm willing to give it a chance, but I'm always hesitant. As for what I think, I can't help but see that see it staying on the track of movies right now, and I'm not sure if using Dragon Ball Kai is a good example of why or a good example of why not, because I mean, personally, I don't mind the approach they took in terms of, not reanimating it, just re-editing it, because I find editing a fascinating thing, and just taking what was there and trying to work it into, this new kind of box seems always seemed kind of cool to me. But, obviously it went 2 years in Japan, then it was canceled. Now it's back for a little while, and it's really confusing. You have a different version in Japan than you do in the rest of the world. It's cut differently. They have, and then all the music controversy. Kai is just the most confusing, awkward mess that's ever come out of there. And most people say that Toei is not bothering to sink enough money into this to even reanimate, the old Dragon Ball. Why would they do, and it's not that merchandise isn't selling, stuff like that. So why would they even bother to put out a new one? But then again, maybe the reason it wasn't selling was because it's all old material, and if it was something actually new, then it would sell better. I really don't know. It did seem, apparently the figures said that after Dragon Ball Kai was canceled, the sales figures started rising again. And I think Battle of Gods did, pulled in some pretty decent numbers, so you never know. But one thing I will say though is that I don't know where else they can go in the future. I think they got to stop milking that 10-year gap though. So far they've already had the Jump Super Anime Tour special and Battle of Gods in that time, which is always like, oh, this is our 10 years of peace. Well, apparently more things are starting to happen in that time period than any other time period in like the entire 40, 50 years of Dragon Ball.
Yes. Alright, I guess I would want to end it here with a Dragon Ball dissection question, since you are the man for that. It seems that almost all your Dragon Ball videos are Dragon Ball dissection. When the day comes when you do really finally finish Dragon Ball dissection, which could potentially be never, because, there's always new things, right? Will you have said almost everything you have said about needed to or wanted to have said about Dragon Ball, or will you be possibly make a new series about Dragon Ball, or just make Dragon Ball topics about other things, or is just Dragon Ball dissection all you're gonna do with the Dragon Ball videos on your channel?
Well, it's possible. I mean, I had 4, I think, Dragon Ball videos before I started Dragon Ball dissection, mostly focusing on the Dragon Box releases. And there was a minor, like I found like a little Star Trek reference in one of them. I made a video about that in an episode of Dragon Ball Z. So it's certainly possible I'd find other topics. And Dragon Ball dissection was, even though it's been almost 3 years in the making since I started doing it, it was in my head for a couple of years before that. So it's been, I used to take walks late at night when I was doing like my Power Rangers videos and just thinking about there's a Dragon Ball series I want to do, and so many things I want to say. Some of the things that I was thinking then are things that I'm writing now, and I'm hoping that I'll get all that stuff out, that I won't forget all this stuff I've been thinking for years.
I'm just curious, how many years beforehand did you have these thoughts about, I guess, the conception of Dragon Ball dissection? For how long did it go on until you actually got down to doing it?
Let's see. I started in January of 2012, and I was definitely thinking about it at least as far back as summer of 2010. So at least about a year and a half before I actually started doing it, the idea was in my head that I wanted to do this. I just didn't know exactly how, or if I could, or if it was too massive of an undertaking to really do what I wanted to do. But I definitely was thinking about it quite a bit, a year and a half before I ever started doing the videos.
Okay. Well, I guess that's going to conclude our discussion / interview with Lance, better known as MistareFusion. You can check the link out in the description. That's where his channel will be, and that's where Dragonball Dissection will be. I highly recommend that series. It's probably the best retrospective of Dragon Ball on the internet, not just on YouTube. I have seen other retrospectives, and yes, Lance, yours is definitely the best one I have come across. And I'm not... It's just in terms of quality and in terms of how much time is really put into it. You can really see it. It's so...
Well, that really means a lot to me. Thank you so much for talking to me today and for saying that, because that means a lot to know that people are enjoying what I'm doing.
Oh yeah, trust me. And it was also a pleasure to have you on here. And hopefully this won't be our last collaboration. But anyway, guys, I'm Blackenfist, and I'm out, man. I also, I just lost my train of thought. It's okay, I can cut that out. I had my other question right here. Hold on a minute. I'm sorry about this.
No problem.
So unprofessional. Oh yes.